things aren't necessarily as they appear because people would be listed on there as invited guests, which meant they wanted them to show up, but it doesn't mean they actually were there and didn't want to. We wanted to get a list of, or we wanted to include in the information that we were gathering the names of the concert promoters, but sometimes those were just kind of, somebody would make up a name and say, oh, this is who's organizing this event, but it was just kind of an off-the-cuff thing that didn't actually carry through historically. But we reported the information anyway in hopes that some researcher might be able to track that down someday and find it all out. But really our goal here was to get as much information as we could down that would be useful to future researchers and organize it in a manner that would be logical for them. So, Joe Conzo has photos of hip-hop shows, and he has photos of just life in the South Bronx. So we kind of split things down the middle that way and split them up so that you get kind of both sides of the picture there. I think what we ended up doing was hopefully very useful to researchers, and the finding aid and other additional information is all available on the library website. And hopefully, I think things are in the works to get as much of the material that's digitized available on the website as well, so that those gears are turning.
Thank you, Sam and Gabriel. I'm almost ridiculously proud, and he's heading off for his tutor right now, so we'll see you in a second. One thing that I like to mention is how I came to Cornell, and how I came to meet Catherine and Anne, and how it came to be that Ithaca ended up being the home for a Bronx archive. A couple of times I've gotten the question, why isn't it in the Bronx? Why isn't it in New York City? And the answer to that can be a really short one, which I'm going to try first, and then it's going to be a slightly longer one. The short one is that New York has never been good at showing love for New York. It's just never been the case. The long one is that I spent around a year taking my dog and pony show around to different academic institutions, to museums, university libraries, trying to find a fit and trying to find a place that wouldn't let their mouth write checks that their behind couldn't cash. Because if you have visited, when you visited, say, your 15th university library, you will notice that some places with very, very famous names, including some places that some people might dream that their children are going to go to somehow, someday, will have cardboard boxes that are like busted up and falling apart, full of priceless incunabula, and they're sitting in corridors because everybody wants to donate their stuff to university. And in some instances, when a university institution gets bombarded with like just those volumes and volumes of donations, that they might not have the time to actually digest them. They might not actually have the time to do something with them. And I'm not saying that the materials are going to end up in crumbling boxes in a corridor somewhere. They might end up in, pristine metal containers that are safe from flames and that are bulletproof, and then remain in those containers for 20 years, 40 years, 60 years, 200 years, what have you. The first time I met Catherine Reagan, we started talking about things and reasoning about things that a year later were executed, and every I was dotted and every T was crossed. So to be able to collaborate with librarians of such extraordinary vision as Anne and Catherine has been a pure joy, because it doesn't, if you're looking at a letter handwritten by Charles Dickens, you can sort of realize that, yeah, maybe that's of cultural significance and historical significance. But I'm going to pass on. There's more show and tell coming up. You can pass this back, Liz. hold it up first, but it's coming back on each side. Let's see if we can, what this is. What on earth am I holding? In my book, what you're holding and looking at right now does rival a Charles Dickens letter. I'd say that it rivals a dozen Charles Dickens letters. And if I'm being particularly crazy, I'll say 2 dozen Charles Dickens letters. Maybe not. But as librarians, Catherine and Anne doubtlessly have the vision to know the significance of the object that you're just holding. The 2 vinyl records with glued-on 7-inchers that are being passed back right now belonged to the masterful Latin DJ Charlie Chase, who was the DJ for the Cold Crush Brothers, arguably the #1 unsung heroes of hip-hop culture in the history of hip-hop. And the 7-inch that's glued onto the 12-inch is a bootleg, an illegally produced 7-inch single, produced in Queens, pressed up by a gentleman named Breakbeat Lenny. Because all of the early MCs were looking for the instrumental drum breakdown of a track. That was the musical cornerstone of hip-hop. And some of these short 4/4 beat patterns that would only last 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, sometimes even shorter, were what the DJs extended using 2 turntables and pushing the fader from one side to the other to extend this breakbeat to give the MCs something to rhyme on. And the records that contained these drum patterns were such grail-like, desirable objects that a record that you could buy a used copy of at a record store on 42nd Street for $1, you could then take the train up to the Bronx and sell it to a Bronx grade-based DJ for $30 of 1977 money. Breakbeat Lenny took one of the most famous, arguably the most famous drum break, which was James Brown's Funky Drummer, and pressed it up at the Apexton pressing plant in Queens under, doesn't say James Brown on the label, it says Yvette and the Kids. Who Yvette and the Kids are, we still to this day do not know. And the reason that he pressed them up as a 7-inch was that the 12-inch wasn't really invented yet. So he pressed them up as 7-inchers. Charlie Chase acquired 2 copies of the Funky Drummer break, and he glued them onto those 12-inch records in order to make them much easier to handle as DJ tools. My friends Disco Wiz and Joe Conzo know that unfolding this narrative has been an obsession of mine for many, many years. And it's a narrative that still unfolds. But the day when I asked Charlie Chase, what do you know about Yvette and the Kids? And he pulled those out of a dusty crate and handed them over to me, was a day that my heart went pitter-patter. I would like to invite a couple of people onto the podium who have something that I categorically lack, which is first-hand experience of hip-hop as it was born in the South Bronx in the 70s. I'd like you guys to give a hand to Disco Wiz, Curtis Sherrod, next to Ray, and Joe Conzo.
I just want to say thank you to everybody for this special event. Thank you to Johan, to Catherine, to Anne, to everybody.